All right, so today I'm going to talk about 6 ways to overcome game dev burnout. So, I've been doing game dev for a very, very long time, since about 2002, but I've embarrassingly only finished probably 2 or 3 games, not including short projects like Game Jam games. I've made quite a few of those. But I have been working on a few games that I rotate throughout the years, and they're kind of stuck in this perpetual state of development. And the game that you'll see footage of now, I've been working on since about 2004. And I go through these stages where I work on it for a long time and then I get sick of it and then I forget about it. And then, a year later, I come back to it and I've got more knowledge because I've been working on other projects and I kind of redo everything. And so this game I've pretty much remade like probably like 5, 6, 7 times now. It's just insane. So I definitely have experience in working very hard and burning myself out. And, I'm in a way committed to a project, but I just never get it done. So I've been working hard on developing strategies to, both stay committed to a project and how to overcome game dev burnout. And making the video now, because although it may be soon, I'm about 2, 3 weeks into what should be a burnout cycle for me. And I'll just show you my GitHub statistics and you can see what I'm talking about here. It's not going to be perfect because I don't always upload to GitHub and I haven't been using it for the whole time I've been a game developer, but as you can see, there is a pretty consistent pattern of periods of time where I'm uploading to the website and periods of time where I'm not. And unfortunately, the time when I'm not is much longer than the period of time that I am. The thing about game dev for me is when I get into game dev, I work very hard. And in that short period of time, I get a lot done. But I can be spending up to 10, 12 hours a day working on a game, no problem, if I have that free time available to me to do so. Otherwise, I'll just spend every single minute of free time I have available to working on something. So, without further ado, I think I've found ways to overcome this problem. And as you can see by the latest block of information that's been uploaded through the game that I'm working on now, it appears that I've broken the cycle. So here are the 6 ways to overcome game dev burnout and stay committed to a project. So the first one is project management. This is going to be a no-brainer for most people probably, but if you're like me, it's something I overlooked for years. And when I say overlooked for years, I literally mean I've only been doing proper project management for the last few months. And I'm very embarrassed to say that, but I just never thought I needed it before. I would keep track of things mentally in my head, and that worked fine. It especially works fine for small games and game jam games. But once I started using project management, I noticed very quickly that it would free up mental RAM is the best thing I can call it, because I'm not using any mental resources to keep track of everything. I've got software doing that for me, and I've been using Trello, and maybe I'll move on to more complex project management tools down the line, but for now, Trello is working fine for me. So I really recommend using that for people like me who may have thought that they didn't need something like that. All right, so the next one is acknowledge the fact that it is something you must find a way to work around and is not something you can just defeat. All right, so these are all strategies for working around game dev burnout. I've kind of broken out of the cycle that I had been in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to get burnt out at some point. All I can say is that I'm more consistent with my game design and I'm working more efficiently and I'm working for longer. And I haven't been burnt out yet, despite being in a time in this game when I should be burnt out compared to my previous burnout cycles. So, yeah, I'm not promising something that you can just snap your fingers and overcome. Like, these are all things you just have to work around and optimize things so that you get the most amount of time and efficiency when working on your projects. All right, so the next is consistency. View this as a marathon and not a sprint, particularly if you're making longer projects. Make sure you limit your hours, including the amount of time spent thinking about your project or game dev in general. For me, when I start getting into a game dev cycle, like I said before, could easily work 10, 12 hours a day if I have that time available to do so. And when I don't have that time available, or when I'm not working on something, I'll be thinking about it all the time. And this is unsustainable. Think of it like fuel that you're just burning through. And that's what I do. It's just I burn through it and then eventually get to a point where I just can't sustain it and it gets boring and I'm like, I just don't know what to do. So what I've done to work around this is that I limit my hours. I make sure that I only work 4 hours a day on a good day right now. And that's working great for me. And when I'm not working on it, I make sure that I'm doing something else, focused on something else. And that right there is just a great tip on its own. The next one is a palate cleanse. So despite your best efforts to try to stop thinking about game dev, if you're like me, that's going to be a difficult thing to do. So what I would suggest is on your time off from game dev, look into some other kind of interest that's completely unrelated. Something that you can kind of lose yourself into, but something that's not going to take up too much of your time because you do want to get back into game dev. And this one has been crucial for me because I think it's just how much time I spend on game dev and thinking about it that eventually, like, I just get tired of it. So having something to completely lose yourself into, for me, has been extremely beneficial because when I come back to game dev, it's just like starting fresh, which I always do. As you can see from the cycles, I always end up starting fresh. It's just after many, many weeks to get to that point where if you do this intentionally, you can get back to that starting point much, much quicker. The next one is make sure you come back to the project you've been working on before. Some people may recommend working on a side project, and for you, that might work. For me, it doesn't. I focus on one thing, and this is problem number one for me because when I come back, I've always moved on to another project. It's always been a side project, and then I get too invested in that, and then that becomes my main project, and the previous project falls away. And then I'll eventually cycle back to it, but I just lose all the momentum by doing that. So if you're like me, I'd strongly recommend going back to the project you were working on before you did the palette cleanse and just keep on working on it. Canceling a project is something that should not be taken lightly, and you should think really hard about before deciding to cancel a game. There are many reasons why you can cancel a game, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't cancel a game, but it is really something you should try to avoid doing at all costs if you can. And if you do have to cancel a game, make sure it's for a very good reason. So the next one is it's focus on improving or working on different aspects of the game if you're noticing that you're starting to get bored or burnt out working on that particular area. So for example, if you've been programming a lot, move on to art. If you've been doing art a lot, move on to sound design. The beautiful thing about having game dev as a hobby is that there's so many different areas that go into it. like programming, art, sound, level design. I could keep on going, but there's so many different areas. So that's one of the beautiful things, that if you're starting to get burnt out on one area, you can just move on to something else and come back to it. And that is it, actually. I put project management was the next one I was about to read, but I actually put that up to number 1 just because that has been so vital to me. So that's it. Those are the 6 steps to avoiding game dev burnout and committing to one project. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like, or comment. Thanks.